And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to JWC Livestream. Uh, this episode today is going to be JWC Story Autopsy for Writers with Ricky and Tom. I'm Ricky.
And I'm Tom.
And we are creative writers. We enjoy the community that JWC has. And we're going to talk today about, well, I speak for myself in this matter, but I call it a creative obsession. Like, I wrote 30,000 words in the last month, just kamehameha into the keyboard. And, I know Tom's working on a bunch of stuff. What are you working on, Tom?
Right now, I'm polishing The Curious Journey of Emily Breck. I'm adding some diary entries to her journey along the way.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'm also working on my new novel, The Bride and Her Mate, A Tale of Two Monsters.
Hence your background there, eh?
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep. So it's about the adventures of the Bride of Frankenstein after the movie The Bride of Frankenstein, when the castle blew up. So to go any further would be a spoiler right now.
Yeah, well, I have a list of 10 questions prepared for later on in the show about this particular topic, because I read, you our last live stream, which was only 10 minutes long, because I'm a goose, but you had read a piece from that, and I got to tell you, it sounded fantastic. And the one you read at club meeting, I'm not going to give any spoilers because I know this is a new thing you're working on, and but I'm looking forward to that Q&A with you. But before we get there, what's going on with Emily Breck?
She's pretty much done. Like I said, I'd like to. I'm going to be inserting the diary entries. It might be 2,000 or 3,000 words tops. But it basically it fleshes out her character more, because when something happens to her, as she goes to her room at night, she picks up her book and she says, "Oh my God, I met a new guy," or "I saw a ghost," or whatever. Something weird happened, and she's like, or she's still in the beginning. She's still trying to understand why she's alive after falling out of her window and falling 14 stories and smashing into a dumpster. And that would throw somebody if you wake up after that and just you're okay. So
well, as if it never happened. I think that'll raise a few eyebrows.
And also I just there was a website that is having a contest there for our first page reading contest, and if you get picked, they'll read and do a professional commenting on your very first page, see if it's intriguing enough to go to page 2. So I'm hoping, knock wood, that they'll grab my entry. So and I made a major change. We've been discussing that instead of starting with chapter 1 in her first life, which is really, really, really dark.
Yeah.
And I just start the book with her waking up after she's died and starting her second life, and I do flashbacks the next few days in her life about that will tell us the story of where she was in Manhattan and how she got to where she is now. So I really like where that's going.
Well, I got to tell you, having read through the whole manuscript, which is basically like a series now, or however you're going to divide it, I didn't mind the first chapter, but I did find, because you've been sending it out and it's getting looked at, and it's been beta read by more than just me. And I do find, though, that the first chapter, especially if you're submitting it for query, it's like it is a bit misleading, to be honest.
Okay.
And I like, but I agree. In other words, I agree with you in the sense that you're doing this re-edit and going through it. And what you sent me so far, it seems better, and it seems like it better represents the overall work, you know, which is going to help you sell it. But it's also like it's good for the reader, you know what I mean? And the way you're doing it in flashbacks, in dribs and drabs, it's like moments of awfulness. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do it when she gets on the bus in Manhattan and she drifts off to sleep, and she'll dream a little bit of a dream about what happened, how it started, and then that same night when she finds a motel to take her to a room and she falls asleep, she has another bit of that first life, and I would say within 30 or 40 pages you'll get the real gist of what went on in her first life, and so
Yeah.
there is that thing very well about the pebbles.
Yeah.
When it happens the second time in her life, she's at a farm and the pebbles start falling, and she's under a table, hiding under a picnic table. Um, and all of a sudden she says, "Wait a minute, this is so familiar!" Boom, and she has that final flashback where she's leaning out of the window and the rocks hit her, and she lets go for a second, and boom. And
yeah, though it's I love the little signs and wonders that unfold in this story and its ethereal quality. You don't know exactly what's going on because it's reality, like it's happening to her, but it's also very surreal and dreamlike. And the voice, man. I mean, you definitely got something there. So yeah, everybody check out last week's 10-minute stream where Tom reads it and give us some likes and comments there. But you hear it for yourself how delicious that is, and it's only a first draft, so it's bound to get better. So what I've been working on is Nidhogg Chronicle. Nidhogg Chronicles is this new book. I got a new book coming out pretty soon, but I'm not going to get into that. This is creative obsession talk. I was writing this. I wrote 1,000 words of this morning before work, and they're on. It's all like Nidhogg Chronicles was just supposed to be about like this alien abductor. All these paranormal fiction stories about alien abduction, which I'm not de-emphasizing. This is a work of fiction. I'm not making a comment on that phenomena. I'm talking about my work of fiction that I'm writing and its genre. Most of the time, when you're dealing with abduction phenomena in fiction, it always goes through the point of who's being abducted. And this book is a little bit different because it's focused around the abductor and her life. She's an extraterrestrial hybrid who's in this breeding program, and she hates her life. And there's just all kind of adventures that she goes in. She runs into an old friend, and they have adventures on Mars, and it goes back and forth. And there's some great combat with like the psychokinetic, like they're floating around, and it's. I think we're gonna have a reading of that. It's still too first drafty to be read right now. Otherwise, I would throw some down today. But probably for next time. So you guys have some. I mean, we got a lot of cool stuff going on today anyway. But next time I'm going to try to read because I love work. I mean, I'm literally having a blast with this project.
If it's not fun, don't write it.
Oh, you could say that again. Absolutely. And anything that dispirits or somehow robs you of inspiration should be de-emphasized at all costs. So yeah, I mean, I'm having a blast with that, man. And there's a new project that's coming to a close. Also, book of Masroth. It's Masroth's Emergence. It's a work of cosmic fiction. I wrote that one back in 2017, and it should be up pretty soon. But anyway, point is creativity's been fantastic. It's been
Hmm.
like 30. I dropped 30,000 words in the last month at least. Um, so
And
and
I have a
go
new
ahead.
project knocking on the door that
Whoa.
I thought of about 10 years ago, and had been dropping little bits and pieces. I'll just give you the title. It's a multi parts idea called Murtag's Gang.
Oh, what's that
Yeah.
about? I maybe you mentioned this a while ago, but I don't remember it
It's it,
clearly.
it's about a guy named Murtag. He's got four friends, two men, two women,
Hmm.
and I'm fashioning a set of stories, short novels maybe, where they're the same characters, but they're dropped into, say, the Wild West, or they're dropped into a post-apocalyptic or a paranormal setting, or a
Nice.
murder mystery, and they play different roles, but they're always Murdoch is always Murdoch, and
Mhm.
Naomi is always Naomi, and Kane only has one name, Kane, and he always shows up, and they're all forces for good, but sometimes they're a little gray. But
Mhm.
I thought that would be a really interesting idea to just you know write a Wild West story where Murtaugh is the sheriff, and and a bounty hunter comes into town, and it's a Naomi, and just these exact same characters in completely different settings, or a whole bunch of stories about them, and it could be interesting.
Oh, I think
So,
so. I think so. I think it's the same kind of spectrum as Emily, but you're taking it over multiple characters. So the story arc is bound to be a little bit
and
different, but
right, and they're not connected at all. They're completely separate adventures.
oh,
Like the
cool.
Murtaugh from the Wild West would never, he's a completely different person than the Murtaugh in the post-apocalyptic one that I'm currently piecing together. Uh,
Hmm.
they
This
might look
sounds
the same, but they're not the same people at
yeah.
all.
Well,
Yeah, so it might be
it's it,
could
it
be interesting.
sounds yeah, definitely. It sounds tasty. When did you come up with it, and when are you working on it? Because I know you're working on the bride. So
Boy, yeah. Maybe about 8, 10 years ago, I just was sitting down, and I thought of an idea. What if I took 4 or 5 characters and wrote different stories, different wrote them in separate settings, but keep the characters pretty much the same.
yeah,
And my first thought was a guy named Murtagh. He's this rough, gruff, tough dude, thick of limbed, and uh, but basically a decent guy. And I said I got to throw some, you know, I have to balance it, so I have two strong women and two strong guys uh,
absolutely.
that show up in the story, and so
Yeah, okay, cool,
cool.
cool.
It's so go ahead.
Well, when are you going to start throwing down words on this? How? Because that's really my thing. You got the Emily journals, you got the bride book. I mean, you got a lot of irons in the fire
Yeah,
going on. So, uh,
I might just do some outlines of the 7 or 8. I have the 7 or 8 ideas of stories already generated. I'll probably turn them. I'll
cool.
turn them into a PDF. I'll send it off to you.
Oh,
And
be great. That'd be great.
but as far as fleshing them out, I have to wait till Emily's done at least, and the bride is cooking pretty well. And
Oh, yeah.
I did about 16 pages of a post-apocalyptic one where one of the women wakes up in her house, and the barriers on her house are starting to break down, and she's got to find a new place because the giant insects are getting in, and she's got to find a new home. And she thinks of there's a mall quarter of a mile away, and she says I could, if it's intact, I could seek safety in this mall.
Hmm.
And Murtaugh and his two friends are there, and she has to get there safely, and that's only the very first 2 chapters of her getting to the mall. And
Sounds like it came from the desert meets Dawn of the Dead. I mean that's a tasty combination if I ever heard one, man. That's great.
not sure where it'll go from when she gets into the mall. You
Hmm.
know, and it's a small. It's not like Woodbridge Center. It's a small, much smaller mall, but still.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see.
Yeah.
And I
What
put
was
that
that?
down as soon as I figure out where it went. I'll take a look and see what I have. Anyway, so go ahead. What was that?
I don't mean to come out of left field, but what was that story you wrote where they were in the prison? It was a family.
Oh yeah, in the teeth of the night.
Yeah, that story was great, man.
It's in Dave's book. That was one of the ones that Dave took. So,
Well, I got to tell you, I love that story.
hmm.
Um, and I'm wondering if that's what you're going to do with this one where they're going to the mall with the bugs. Is it going to have a similar? I'm not saying verbatim. I'm saying a similar voice because the mood in that was like fantastic.
Oh,
You know?
I, I had a friend who borrowed Dave's book just to read the three stories, and he said, I like the other two, but in the teeth of the night, he says, boy, that was really well done. He said, very atmospheric, and it was a monster story, but the monsters don't show up. It just, the story cuts off just before they make an appearance. He goes, I was impressed. I said, okay, I like that one the best of the three also, but
Tension,
um,
tension, and mood
yeah,
gushing out of that. It was great. And
I could always read a little bit.
yeah, well, that hey, actually, I mean, if you have it, maybe we could check that out. It's up to you. But I will say, since we went over creative obsession and obsessions and shook hands as far as where our products are, it brings me to the major topic at hand, which every one of our shows is going to have, which is in this instance, it's sort of a retread of the whole to pants seat or not to pants seat thing. Um, I have some outline criteria that I kind of go over, and it's like it's just for the purposes of informing process. I know because there's no wrong way. Uh, it's called
Hmm.
if the words are showing up, then what you're doing is working. And my
Right.
the reason I bring it up is because even though there is no wrong way, I found that my chapter game got upped when I was doing, and this is JWC when we were doing technical writing and articles and stuff. I learned a lot. Everything I do is self-taught because it's just how I'm wired or whatever. But uh, the thing I noticed is when I embraced the technical side, when I embraced outlining, my chapter game got better. And for me, it hasn't interfered with my voice. It hasn't interfered with because I still feel the liberty of pants seating, and that's really the thing. Is the structure of the form constraining you? That's what
Hmm.
people get bent out of shape about, and why pants seaters seat for life a lot of the times. And again, no judgment, however you want to do it, but I have a couple different questions as per process. Um,
Okay.
Now, I know you don't outline, but these questions are things that come up with my mind. In my thought space, when it comes to writing, I like to think about it. I didn't used to, but I've been doing this since 2011 now, so I picked up some tricks. But when you like, I'll phrase them like this: these questions are like criteria for outlining, but it's also I want to get your thoughts briefly about how these questions interact with your pants seating and what your method is. So question A, and this again, this pertains to pants seat to not pants seat, or to outline more preferably. But in this instance, when you sit down to write and you're pants seating and you're in the creative flow, the muse is hitting, and you get that note of episodic satisfaction, like words start coming out, or in your case, I think you'd use a notebook, right?
Mm-hmm. Hand
You
by
could
hand.
Yeah, so you compose by stylus and paper, but I type because I type pretty quick. Um, so do you ever think about a word budget? Like, and by word budget, I have a whole word budget outline thing that I use to control the length of my chapters. But I'm not
Mm.
saying you would do that. I'm asking when you sit down, what is your, I guess, and it also kind of plugs into the word yield, which is how much do you write every day? So when you sit down, do you have a word budget you set to fulfill? Like, are you trying to write a certain amount of words when you sit down, or is there no conscious thought to that end?
I try to do, I say, a minimum of 500 words a day.
Mm,
Sometimes it's a lot more.
mm-hmm.
Um, and as
Always.
far as plotting, it all for me it depends on the project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Emily, I had a dream that
Yes.
showed me all seven of her deaths,
Yeah.
and I got up and I wrote about an hour and a half, and I went back to bed. And when I sat down in the morning at my computer, I looked at my notes, I read them, and I sat down and just started going. And
Fantastic.
it worked. It just flowed right out of my head because I could see 2.5 pages of notes turned into 700 pages. um,
Great.
the
That's
Bride might take a little more plotting out.
mhm.
Um, because it deals with a lot of history. She's in the
Yeah.
middle of Europe. There was a lot of wars going on, a lot of assassinations, a lot of
Yeah, that's the
Napoleon
thing.
and
Yeah.
etc. So
Yeah.
I have to figure out where she might be at any one time during the 19th century and the 20th century, for that matter, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so, and I have my fantasy epic, The War of the God Shards. I
Yeah.
did 8 months, 6 to 8 months of background history and religions and characters and creatures and maps and
Hmm.
before I even wrote a single word. So that's sort of not really a plot, just basically writing the history of the world. Before I get to a point where it says, okay, now I understand where this this guy's going to drop into this world, and I understand where I can go from that point. So that's not really an outline, but it's again
Well,
a completely different way of doing things, and you
yeah.
know. So
Well,
I'll say it depends on the project, and you know.
sure. And that brings me to the next question, but I can't. You mentioned Shirella, so when it comes to that
Mm,
God Shards project, man, that Shirella character is just fantastic, and that's the thing. The next question in the criteria is it's uh, question B, which is the project tangent. And what I mean by that is your narrative timeline. And what that boils down to is it's just like what you're saying. It plugs into world building. Now, I have with Nidhogg Chronicles, I have all this world building that's going on. That's it's folded into the mixture. It's done through a little bit of expo, but a lot of dialogue, some flashbacky stuff. But the point is when you're taking them on a journey through some unknown place, which I find to be, when I'm doing this, there's a decent amount of world building. Some people like it, some people don't. But if it's done artfully, it takes you on a trip, and it's an immersive factor. And the deeper the reader gets, the more mind theater there is, the more that they get taken away from their body. Like you read a good book, if you read a couple chapters, I mean, you could lose a whole afternoon reading a book or doing something. It's the same thing with writing. Time flies when you're having fun.
oh,
But
sure.
when it comes to this project tangent and your world building, I should think that with the bride, I mean, definitely with Sharilla too, because Volrema is its own world that needs to be, as she's traveling, it needs to unfold. Uh, but when it comes to the bride, there is the constraint of the historic period. So when it comes to your project tangent, and you don't outline, but you do research that plugs you into the historic period to get your facts straight, so to say. So, how do you process when you're writing? You just study your notes and then you just let it. Well, again, and you don't type, you write. But how does that plug into your consciousness as far as your creative writing is concerned?
How does what plug into my consciousness? The
your notes, which are like,
well,
it's not an outline, but it technically is an outline, because you're saying she's here at this point, she's here at this point. So how does that work? How does that factor in?
Believe it or not, when I say with the God Shards book, I had all these notes just in my head, and all the when they were in a certain place, I said, I know. Okay, I said, this is to the west, and this forest is to the right, to the east, and the bad guys are over at the northeast, and I basically just I have the notes handy in case so what was that creature again, or what was that? Where am I headed, or and but I just go. I mean, with Emily, I knew when she's in St. Augustine. I knew that I had to write to a certain point until she died again, and but I knew there was a central core of the story in that chapter of that life that I had to write about until it was all fleshed out and all done. And I you remember quite a few times when I was writing where we would get on a meeting and I would say, "Oh, Emily's about to die again," and you would say, "Oh, that's cool."
I know. Because
so,
again, that is the point. Is she's mysteriously cycling from life to death, and that's the thing. There has to be some kind of orientation of where she's going. So you let it stay in the unconsciousness where your muse is, where your creativity flows from. You just study that stuff and you let it simmer down there, and then it just shows up when you're pants-seating. It shows up in your chapters. So
right.
That's fantastic. I was doing the same thing with my early Afternoty novels, Tom. Same exact way.
The thing is, say with Emily, when she got to a new town, let's say St. Augustine, I knew kind of the ending, how she died. But getting there, I often have no clue. I just would write, and the story would just unfold in my head, and it would go from A to B to C, and it would just progress. I thought in a pretty natural progression. If you read the book, right, and it flows it flows well, and
absolutely.
And there's a logical progression to every chapter, and
without question, it's all coherent. There's no overt discontinuity. And that brings me to the next question, which is question C, concerning your draft process.
Okay.
Could you just briefly go over, because I know you wrote Emily within the last couple years, and if you could briefly go over what's the difference in your draft process from this project versus something like Shirella, and how do you foresee drafting things going forward based on what the Emily project taught you?
Right. All my first drafts are handwritten, with very, very few rare exceptions. The what do you call it? The romance thing we did for the genre wheel. I did that completely on the computer, which was it was an interesting experiment to do.
How did you like it? How did you like it?
Oh, it was great. Just sitting down and just letting. I don't. If I typed as fast as I could write, I would type my first drafts. But I write pretty quickly, and because the stuff just is there in my head, waiting, patiently in line to get on the page, and
and bothering you all day until you. Until
and then when it's all done, I'll type it into the computer, which is the second draft, and it changes. It has to. I mean, between first draft to second, it gets cleaned up and a little clearer, and I cut stuff out, add stuff. And then I go to I do drafts with Pro Writer Aid. I run through the grammar through. Also, the third draft I consider would be to listen to it on, say, Word. And listening to it, you uncover so much
Oh
that
yeah,
you miss when you're typing or writing by hand. And fourth
no
draft
doubt.
would be grammar and spelling and punctuation, and um, then I would listen to it again. I must run through 6 to 8 drafts before I get to a point where I said this is done.
I mean, it sounds like a great drafting process. And folks out there, you heard him. He does multi draft. It starts out notebook, then it's he types it or speaks it. Then he listens to it. He gets maybe some beta readers. He does readings of it at JWC, Inkling style, Creative Obsession style, and people, we do creative comments. We give some kind of creative or inspirational critique. Mostly with me, it's like, oh, if I was writing it, what would I do with it? And you
Mm.
listen to it, which people, when you guys are doing your projects, make sure you read it aloud or have it read aloud or do a PDF reader or whatever, because Tom's absolutely right. I've been doing that for years, but even more so now. When you finish a chapter, even if it's first draft, you listen to it, you hear what's going on, and your voice, as a matter of voice fulfillment, which is the maturity of your own style, your voice will start to put, well, it should do this. We've used this too many words redundantly.
Mm.
Like it sweeps through it. Is that how it works for you, Tom? Also?
Oh, sure. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you get there's a when I have a draft that when I listen to it more so the past couple of years than I have maybe ever before, because every
Mm-hmm.
time I listen to it, I fix it a little bit and I run it through a grammar check, and then I listen to it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to Emily for the third time, straight through, and I'm finding you always find stuff.
Oh,
There may not be a point where it's done editing, before before an agent, knockwood, grabs it, and then they'll have someone edit it.
mm,
Uh, but I like to have it to a point where the punctuations are correct, and the words are spelled right,
preferably.
and before I wouldn't want an agent to say, this is really good, but you should learn how to spell.
Yeah.
That would be terrible.
Ooh, embarrassing for sure. And that leads me to the final question in this line. If you had a genie lamp and you could just snap your fingers and make a wish, how would Emily get published? Like what, how would it go blow by blow? Yeah.
Hmm.
Hope it's not too on the spotty. If
No,
so,
ideally, as a GD wish would be to have it
mhm.
published by a major publisher. If I could think of one, let's say
Legacy print, in other words, like with a minimum.
like Ballantine Books or Random
Yeah.
House. Say Random House would grab it as a hardcover. Uh, what do you call it? Oprah Read of the Month type
Hmm.
book of the month, and
Um,
and I've been told by one person that worked in the publishing business. He says writing the book is the first part. After that, when an agent grabs it, you have to be available to promote it. They're not going to promote it for you, no matter what. If you're the next Stephen King,
oh,
you're still going to have to make the rounds in bookstores and signings, and
and so,
and
yeah,
right,
yeah,
and so that
that's
would
why.
be it. The Random House grab it as a first of the top of the line hardcover book, and Oprah reads it and recommends it, and Netflix calls.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a dream come true. That's a functional imagination too. That sounds like the perfect genie wish. All right. So that's how we're gonna close up for the Emily project, but that only means now that we go to our next line of questioning, and this revolves around your bride book. Now, could you
Hmm.
just reintroduce our listeners to how this muse came to you? and then I have some questions prepared that
Oh,
I'm because this project is fantastic. I love because
right.
you're so able to execute this because of how I mean you've written stuff before like this. So where did this muse come from? When did it start?
Uh, Things, ideas come from the weirdest places. I was
Yeah.
at my Nissan dealer, and I had just settled down for 2 or 3 hours or whatever for them to fix whatever was wrong this particular time.
Hmm.
And I was finishing my lunch, and I look up for the tail end of the news, and it had a story about violence on the subway is
Oh.
on the rise. I said, "Ooh, that's really terrible." And I got this picture in my mind of the Bride of Frankenstein and the monster
Wow.
riding on the subway and trying to look inconspicuous, and it's not working.
Oh man.
And I said, suppose they were to take the subway. Well,
Wow.
how did they get on the subway? And I always carry my pad with me, and I opened it up and I wrote down the bride and her mate go underground, because underground is what they call the subway in London, the
Yeah.
underground.
Sure.
And I figured it's also a double play on words because they're dead. They were dead bodies, and
Yeah. That's
and
it.
I just sat down. I just started writing, and I wrote, well, 12, 13 pages, and I said, and they called my name, and I had just finished the first draft, and I said, how do you like that? This is amazing. This
Yeah.
idea popped in my head. I wrote it up, and basically that first draft though became an outline for the novel.
Oh yeah.
Because I read it, and I had people in another group read it, and they said this is kind of choppy, and it jumps all over the place. And I said, and I had a flash. I said that's because this is just a synopsis or an idea for a long novel. This is just the ideas of what happens to her. And they said,
Yeah.
okay, so that works. It works now as a synopsis of, you know, and so basically, I thought I would do in the Bride of Frankenstein movie. It ends with the monster telling the Dr. Frankenstein and his bride, "You guys leave, get out of here." And then he tells the bride, "You stay." And he pulls this lever, and the castle
Goes up.
tower blows to smithereens. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, the monster appeared in the Son of Frankenstein and the Ghost of Frankenstein and a whole bunch of others. I said, what happened to the bride? She never showed up again. So I said, she had to have survived. So I said, I'm going to write this book about her adventures
Hmm.
trying to survive in Europe in the early 19th century, and moving around and periodically meeting the monster who she detests for over 100 years. She just tries to kill him repeatedly, setting him
Hmm.
on fire, throwing him off a cliff, running him over with on a train, whatever.
Yeah.
And he keeps popping back, um,
It,
because
it, he's indestructible then.
yeah, he is, and he heals really well, and she heals,
Hmm.
and he's like a big puppy dog. All he wants to do is be with her, and he's
Yeah.
fine. And she just says, "No, you can't be with me,
Yeah.
never, ever." You know. But slowly but surely, he grows on her until finally she accepts him into her life, and they move into the 21st century together. And behind the scenes is a very powerful group called the Prometheus Society, which is actually the Frankenstein group, which was started by Dr.
Yeah.
Frankenstein to
Yeah.
basically he feels guilty that he tried to destroy them. So now he sets up this fund and this group to try to find a permanent home for the bride and the monster, provided they could ever find them. So they spend 140 years or whatever trying to figure out where these two individuals are, and I have it dovetails in a very, very happy ending for them. And
Oh, cool. Cool.
I thought this could really work. And there's
Yeah.
also I ran across something called the Amazon Kindle Vella from Amazon. that it's a way to serialize a novel, and release a chapter every 2 weeks, every month, and people spend credits. They become fans and they subscribe basically. And so I thought
Yeah.
I'm going to do this book as an Amazon Bella novel and do a whole bunch of short 500 to 600 page chapters. Um,
Well,
and
you got some
so
you got some clairvoyance there, because that was going to be one of my other questions, is what was your goal for publication concerning this, the all important book craft. So you're going to go with this Vela, huh? And
sure, it's a
how
new
long?
experiment to do.
No,
Hmm?
admirable. It's admirable. I dig that you're doing that. How long do you think this is going to go, Tom? What's your word budget for this project? I know you
Whew.
don't deal you don't
I
deal in those terms normally, but I'm always
I don't
curious.
I don't set word budgets. I just write,
Yeah,
however long it takes.
that's great.
So
Pants cedar to the end.
I'm thinking it's going to be in the neighborhood of say 300 pages.
Okay.
Um,
So 100,000 words, probably, if we had to guess, like a big old novel, sprawling novel in length.
yeah,
Like,
a light gothic fantasy.
yeah,
It's not going to be really heavy
it's
like
gonna
the
be
original
fun.
novel was. Because
Mm.
I just thought I would write it as very as entertaining as I possibly can with her. I mean, in 1909 she throws him out of an airplane and into the you know, and he still comes back. And wild stuff like that.
Fantastic, man.
A
Fantastic.
dozen times she sets him on fire. She says, to why she says that's not going to work. It gives me satisfaction, but he's not he
Yeah.
doesn't die. So
How many times does she try to kill him before she's just like, why won't you die? Like, when does she lose her patience? It's like,
oh yeah, the second or third or fourth time she tries to kill him, she's she gets really frustrated that
yeah.
he just sometimes he shows up and all his clothes are burned off, and he's like, God, this is really even uglier than you were before. And then next time he's wearing clothes, he says, Where do you get your clothes from? And
He's
but
a
he's
big fella. I
yeah.
know the dilemma well.
So he has there's a little he has an ally that helps him, which we won't get into just right now. That
Yeah, yeah.
um
We don't want to reveal too many tasty details, do we?
yeah,
Leave
and
some mystery.
no.
Yeah.
So we have
Uh,
the bride. The bride. I worked at a previous her previous life, who she was mostly, that she was a midwife or a doctor, and she has some medical knowledge,
mhm.
and she also was smart. And in the book, she has a she gets conked in the head on the way down from the castle, and she has this photographic memory, so she reads as much as
She's
possible.
very intelligent. She's very
Right,
intelligent.
by 2022, she has the equivalent of 4 or 5 doctorates because she has
Yeah.
so many subjects she's read. Just to survive. It's a survival
Yeah, sure.
mechanism. The learning.
Oh, yeah. Well, take control of what surroundings you can, and the doctor probably set her up with something like that when he created her. And that brings me back to another important question that I'm going to ask, which is, in your approach to this, what's your ratio between Mary Shelley's masterpiece, original work of sci-fi, which can never be de-emphasized, uh,
Right.
versus the universal monsters? And
Wow.
I probably mentioned this before, but the universal monsters are a potent piece of IP. Uh, you go around the
Oh,
world, everyone knows who Spider-Man is. Everyone knows who Superman or Batman is. Everyone knows Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman. It's like
right.
the elementals of Vincent Price, Gothic horror, and all
Well,
that stuff. So what I'm asking you is what is your ratio when you approach this? Um,
I had an idea that the first 2 films, Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein,
mhm,
are virtually autobiographical pieces.
mhm.
They happened,
Yeah.
and that Mary Shelley wrote the novel after 20, roughly 20 years after the events happened. And
Yeah.
but she only had a little piece of the story. She had like somebody mentioned, she overheard it in a restaurant or driving by or whatever, on a coach. She hears me talking about, and he pieced together a man and a woman, and then they died in a fire. And that inspired her to write this whole novel. So the book, there's a lot of reality. What really happens in the book. So I would say it's, oh boy, 55% Universal, 45% novel. And speaking of IP,
Yeah.
the Bride of Frankenstein, in her existence on film, is maybe 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And that was it. And yet she is universally known as much as the monster is. I mean, that image, everybody knows what the Bride of Frankenstein looks like. And she has 5 minutes screen time in and I thought that's
Absolutely.
incredible.
No, yeah. Uh,
To have accomplished that.
well, yeah, and that's the thing. I was shown those films when I was real young. One of my uncles made sure I got baptized into the classic black and white horror, like even anything Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff. He showed me the Tower of London, like all those classic flicks. And there's so much to learn from them as far as like mood and whatever. And
Mm.
back in the day, before cable, when those things came on one of the networks, it's like people stopped and they really. I mean, if you were a horror fan, like my family were all horror buffs. Even my great grandma used to watch the Wolf Man or whatever. So you can see where I get it. It's in the family tree, you know.
Oh, sure.
Um, yeah, but you're right. It is a noteworthy accomplishment, no doubt. You know, she's known
Like I
all
said,
over.
oh yeah. I mean, and speaking no words, some hissing.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Yeah.
she's made an incredible impression on me, so much so that
Oh yeah.
I'm going to be writing this book dedicated to Elsa Lanchester, who was amazing in that, uh, you know, in that part.
Absolutely, unforgettable. And that leads me to our final question for today's episode concerning this Bride of Frankenstein book. We're going to ask more questions, folks, and let us know in your comments what you'd like to know about this topic, because we have stuff for next episode, because this project's just fascinating, and I know you're just getting started, so it's going to be ongoing.
Hmm.
But I remember you posted on Facebook, on Joe's Writers Club, JWC Facebook, you posted about the title. You had a 3-point title survey, and it got a lot of reactions. People were really into it. How do you account for that response? Because I'm saying it was pretty big. Like, you got a decent amount of responses, more than usual, I think. And it's a question, like, do you attribute it, as I do, to the well-known mythology of the universal monsters and of Shelley's amazing work?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's continuously and never-ending fascination with the Frankenstein story. I personally have read 6 or 7 sequels to the original novel. I mean, there's always been people writing adventures. I even have 2 where he meets Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And I did my own Sherlock Holmes meets the Frankenstein monster story.
It's a fun exercise, I'm sure.
Yeah, I had a blast, but that particular creature is entirely different from the one that's in this Bride novel. I've given that monster a completely different identity. He's still alive now in modern. He's living in Brooklyn.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and But that's a whole other story. So I had a really good reaction. I think I took no one is bored of Frankenstein monster. It's a great work, and people are always fascinated with new twists on it, new
Oh yeah, yeah.
new angles of that, and the reactions are really good. I'm going to go. I got the most votes for um, the title is the bride, the bride and her mate: a tale of two monsters, and
Right on.
I think that's going to work.
And they voted for that one. They that one was most favored.
Oh, overwhelmingly, they like the first, the bride and her mate, and they
Yeah.
like the one, A Tale of Two Monsters. But someone's like, "What two monsters are you talking about?" So they said the third one. They said the third one, you know, tells me all I need to know. That the bride is obviously the bride of Frankenstein. Her mate, monsters, and they got it. They said, people can eat it up. So that should be really
Yeah.
good.
Well, there is something in closing, and it's definitely embedded in the original text and follows through into the cinema. But there is something about that mystery, the power of life, the power of death, especially in the old world and the occult mind. But when science swallows alchemy and takes on those mysteries in the way that it does, there's just something very, very wonderful about like pondering that. Like the notion of him piecing the monster together or growing the monster somehow. It's almost like passing into some kabbalistic manipulation of life force,
Mm,
but he drapes it in science. It's got industrial machinery or what have you, and it's just it inspires the contemplation of wow, because in that he has a bride, they can they might procreate and make their own race of monsters.
right.
And anyone who likes sci-fi horror or fantasy, the notion of a new species arising through some industrial manipulation or occult operation, it's so super intriguing. I mean, you can sit here and read something like that and your muse starts flashing and you get your own bolts of inspiration. So it's just I'm totally behind this project. I think it's great, Tom.
But I read a blog article, I believe it's by Janet Friedman, about the continuing popularity of the original novel Frankenstein. She said that she did some work, that it still sells 40,000 copies a year. And
Great.
since 1818, it's never been out of print. Because that's a dream novel for any writer to sell 40,000 copies ever, in period.
Forever,
How many authors have
showing no signs of slowing after
No,
more than a century,
Yeah, she said 500 years from now, it'll still be selling 40,000 copies a year when we're out of, colonizing Europa, etc.
Yeah,
People will have it in there.
That's right. When we're sailing our faster than light ships into the Arcturus system, they'll still be printing those out and that's what art is, folks. It's timelessness. It cannot be touched by the coils of temporality so long as it's faithfully reproduced. It endures. And isn't that the goal, is to make such a blast crater? Not that we can approach the hem of these great masters such as Mary Shelley, but if we reach into that cloud of genius, maybe we'll be blessed. Who knows?
Yep. I can envision the people on the inhabitants of Deep Space Nine in the library there. There's a copy of Frankenstein. I mean,
and a hollow suite probably, and Quark's bar, so you can go into the castle. Would the hollow suite be in black and white, or would it be in color?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
it depends on your what do you call it? Your whim. If you want to do the Hammer version, it'll be in very stark color.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Not Technicolor, one of those other ones.
Hammer.
Well, yeah.
Anyway,
that's it. So we just made our first Star Trek reference, so clearly it's time to end the show because we'll lose control of where this goes if we start talking Trek.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead, Tom, and plug your Kindle collection and whatever else you see fit to do. I leave that up to you.
I have a collection of short stories right now. Kindle. It's called Dwellers in the Shadows. It's available on ebook, paperback, and hardcover.
That's great.
Got some decent reviews.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I enjoyed what I read of it. I'll tell you.
And I have a second collection coming out soon. I'm not sure. I'm piecing it together now. It'll be called Is It Still Out There?
Cool. And oh, well, yeah, your shorts, I mean, your novels are great too, man, but your shorts, you excel at short stories. The voice, the dialogue, expo, world building, thematics, everything's great. Narrative flows perfectly. Check it out, folks. And what was the name of that one you have on Kindle again? Just say it again.
Dwellers in the Shadows.
And that's Thomas Tiernan's work. Go check it out, folks. And me, Richard Andrew Olkis, if you search on Amazon, I have a cyberpunk book, dystopian cyberpunk that came out last year called Babbletron After the Fire. I had a bunch of people buy it already. And I've had people come and tell me of all different demographics that they're really, really digging it. It's action-packed. It's breakneck pace. James Cameron, white knuckle level of action. Check it out. Amazon Kindle. Richard Andrew Olkis. And coming soon, Book of Masroth. Masroth Volume 1, Masroth's Emergence. Coming soon to Amazon. Same deal. And that was a lot of fun. And I don't want to talk too much about it until it's out, but it should be soon, right around the corner. So this has been a great live stream, Tom. As always, I had a blast with you, man. We talked about some really great stuff, and we're going to try to do this more regularly, folks. We were doing this around this time last year, and life just got super busy, as I'm sure you know. Everything's hectic. But we're going to try to make a consistent commitment to do this. Remember to check us out Thursdays, Eastern Time, 8 p.m. That's when we started a little late today, but we're going to try to get better with that. Assemble more promptly, and we're working out the kinks, but it's almost there. And make sure you reach out, like, subscribe, check out Joe's Writers Club. Go to joeswriters.club and sign into our forums. Check out our Facebook page or other social media accounts. JWC is a fantastic community. I've learned so much from it, and we're trying to grow, and we have a bunch of really cool stuff in store. So come along with us and check out what's going on at Joe's Writers Club. And that would be joeswritersclub.com. Check out our website also. And thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure, Tom. Thanks a lot for this. And we'll see you again real soon. So
talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Have a good one.